Okay, so I'm going to talk about measuring the performance of social media marketing in the charitable domain. Kick things off with a quick quote from Bob Hope. This basically just summarizes that everyone has some inner capacity to give to charity. And this research is about making sure charities can take full advantage of that. So quick overview of what I'm going to be talking about. I won't bore you by reading all that out. Some background and context to this work. So why am I doing it? So basically, there is a problem in the world of fundraising at the moment. I'm sure you've all had that experience where you're walking down the street and you see a fundraiser ahead of you with like a clipboard and a donation tin, and you sort of have a panic in your mind, like, oh, I don't want to be stopped. I really don't want to be stopped. And you wonder whether you should turn around. This shows some of the possible routes you take to avoid the fundraiser. And you get closer to them, and they sort of catch your eye, and you make up an excuse that you've got to go and catch a train or something, and you carry on walking, but they sort of point out that the train station's actually in the other direction. You carry on anyway. And you feel bad, because 10 seconds down the road, you realize you don't even know what the charity was that they're working for. So obviously, this isn't a very good method for the fundraisers to employ. So there's been studies that show that the return on this is decreasing, and it's really not effective. So Seth Godin sums this up by saying people are better at ignoring you than ever before. So I guess this makes sitting through a conference presentation a bit more easier for you all. Similarly, Brian Miller sort of states that mass marketing and sort of these interruptive marketing techniques that people use are sort of not what should be used in today's world, where people just don't want to be interrupted. And he suggests that fundraisers have got to move to where people are already interested in. And so statistics on social media use make it clear that that is what the majority of people in today's world are interested in. So a bit of marketing theory for you. There's this analogy of a funnel where a marketing campaign goes out to a massive audience. They're squeezed through this marketing campaign, which acts as a funnel, and at the end, some supporters come out of the end, like freshly squeezed orange juice. But it's quite ineffective. You have to send out the same campaign to everyone, so for example, a TV campaign, and hope that in that audience there's someone that's going to be interested and will buy your product or donate to your charity. So Seth Godin suggests that this analogy of a funnel is flipped. So instead, you have a megaphone. And he says to use social media as the megaphone because it empowers an audience. You need a very small number of supporters to go and use this megaphone or social media. And that can get the word out to a massive audience. And it's more personalized than a traditional marketing campaign. So people are generally more likely to do something if they see that one of their friends is supporting a campaign or something. So this has massive potential to reach a huge audience and hopefully increase the returns for the charity. But it's not all good and simple. Marketing on social media brings in new challenges, so I'll talk about them for a few seconds. First of all, knowing what to measure in order to determine the performance of a campaign on social media. This is something that really annoys me at the moment. I keep seeing reports that tend to measure campaigns based on the number of likes they get on Facebook or the number of followers they have on Twitter. And yeah, I think every time I see one, I just think, oh, crikey, not another one. It's not a good way to measure it. It sort of goes back to when you're at school and there's always the popular kid and they're like, oh, I've got hundreds of friends and I've got 100 friends on Bebo or MySpace or whatever's cool with the kids these days. So you wouldn't measure that kid on how many friends they've got in terms of their future performance. They might go on to be successful, but it's not guaranteed. So why should it be applied to a marketing campaign? Additionally, the web and social media in particular gives rise to this phenomena of slacktivism. So people clicking a button on something and thinking that they're involved with a campaign. So Rockman et al. In 2011 summed this up. The key bit of this is that it grants satisfaction to the person who's doing it, making them feel like they're involved and doing something worthwhile. But what is a click on a like button or a retweet on Twitter actually worth? So knowing how to measure these things is a bit of a problem. So I'm going to talk quickly about an initial study I carried out last year. So this is forming the basis and the beginning of my PhD work going forward. And its aim was basically to collect a collection of metrics from the literature, put them together into a framework, and provide some sort of system for measuring and analyzing the performance of a charitable marketing campaign. So the first step of this was to break down the possible results of a campaign into sort of different stages and different goals. So first of all, we have awareness, which is basically those popularity measures that lots of people are currently using. So number of likes on Facebook, number of followers, YouTube subscribers, etc. Moving on from that, we have engagement. So this is how many people are actually engaging with your campaign and interacting with you online. So this is sort of a step further. It's a bit more interactive and shows a little bit of commitment. And finally, there's action and results, which is what the campaign is actually hoping to achieve. So this might be a donation, it might be signing a petition or something like that. And so the focus of the study was to look at what could be told from social media itself. Going forward, I'll be using more methods, looking at actually interviewing the charities themselves. But for this one, we were looking just at what we could tell from social media. And it was sort of decided that determining the outcome of the campaign on social media at this point would be a bit unfeasible. So we looked at the first two stages of awareness and engagement and looking at differentiating them to see any patterns. And so this is the framework I came up with initially. It's split into two halves. So on the left-hand side, we have the performance over time. So that basically looks at all the tweets relating to the campaign and analyzes the performance over the duration. The right-hand side looks at the performance of a single tweet. So this may be something within that campaign that asks for some specific form of action. And the framework's then split into layers. So the top layer is the awareness metrics. So they're basically how popular and well-known the campaign is. Moving down, we have engagement, so replies and retweets, which are a bit of interaction. And then feedback percentage, which is the proportion of engaging people out of the total audience, and URL click-through rate, which is how many people have actually clicked on the link and followed through. So it was tested on an initial case study of two cases. We chose the Dogs Trust, which is a UK-based charity with the aim of rehoming abandoned dogs. And they were chosen because there had been media coverage of how they had attributed Twitter with successfully leading to rehoming of dogs. So they believed what they were doing and talking to people through Twitter was helping them. The second charity was the World Food Programme. They're an international charity aimed at providing food, it's in their name. And they were chosen because at the time there was the hunger crisis in East Africa. So it was believed they would be using social media to try and gain support for that. And so a custom program was written to access the Twitter search API based on the keywords shown there, which are basically their Twitter usernames. So that collected everything from them, to them, mentioning them, everything regarding their campaigns. And this was run hourly to collect data. And the results were quite interesting. So this graph shows the proportions of the tweets during the time frame for each charity and their audience. And so what you can see is that for the Dogs Trust, there's a massive proportion of replies. So that's the light blue, which shows, which indicates that the charity is engaging in conversation with their audience. So both sides, high replies. For the World Food Programme, there's not so much of that. There's a lot of new tweets from the charity, a lot of retweets. And when we looked at the data a bit more, it was clear that they were retweeting themselves. So it's clear that their aim is just to spread news about what they're doing. And their audience sort of follows suit and retweets them a lot. They don't really reply. There's no interaction there. It's all about sharing. And to validate this, I looked at the number of tweets over time for the two charities and their audience. So the top graph shows the Dogs Trust, and it's clear there's a day-night pattern there because they're UK-based. So generally everyone goes to sleep except this guy who's up at 2 in the morning tweeting about dogs, as you do. And it shows that when the charity is tweeting, the audience is tweeting as well, which sort of supports that previous finding that there's probably some conversation going on there, showing some engagement between the charity and its audience. So that's a pretty good result for them. For the World Food Programme, there's not really any pattern there at all. They tweet every so often. Their audience is tweeting all the time because it's an international charity. And there's no real pattern at all to what they're doing. Looking at the performance of some single tweets during the time frame, it's clear that actually it's not as simple as that, just looking at the interaction over time. So the World Food Programme had a much higher click-through rate. So looking at this, it was found that Bill Gates had retweeted one of their marketing messages, and this had just led to a huge number of people on Twitter then clicking on the link and going to the page that they were promoting. So this shows that it's not all about how much you're doing on there, it's sort of to do with who follows you, and having influential followers can help. But for the Dogs Trust, they were still getting a decent feedback percentage, although decent, it's still 0.1%, so all these scores are fairly low. Some findings from this, we did successfully distinguish between awareness and engagement. The metrics we used are a start, so that we're going to look at more, and we're going to look at different social media platforms, but we're confident that we can distinguish these two stages. What we haven't done so far is link these to the final stage of action, to see which is more important for leading to a result of the marketing campaign. Generally, the metrics were all successful. The URL click-through rate, there was a bit of a problem in that using the Bitly API to access this, you get a long list of sites and applications which basically are where the clicks came from, and you count how many came from Twitter. But then you get stuff like TweetDeck, and you have to make a judgment about whether you include that as Twitter or not, as it could be coming from Facebook or LinkedIn through TweetDeck. It successfully measures performance over time and of a single tweet. But again, we haven't looked at the final results of the campaign. So that's basically the next step. And the framework is suitable, we think, at the moment for measuring the marketing of charities on social media. We looked also at doing using the same framework for measuring activism on social media. It wasn't quite so successful because there's no central account to link all these things back to. So a lot of the metrics actually use the audience size, which I know I said was a terrible thing to do earlier, but it can be useful. So when you're looking at a distributed group like activists, you don't have this measure because you don't know how big the total audience is, as there's no Twitter account for it. Going forward, we've got a study planned after this conference to determine the reasons that charities are using social media. And the purpose of this is that we know exactly what needs to be measured. And so we're going to compare that with an audit of their social media presence to determine whether what they're doing on social media is actually what they're trying to achieve, so whether it's the right thing to do or not. This will then lead us to be able to improve the framework more, add more metrics for more social networks, and really come up with a concrete method of analyzing performance for these campaigns. Also going to be looking at modeling the campaigns and the sort of audience around them, and simulating the propagation of the campaign through that network so you can sort of predict the future performance as it's going on, and generally just collecting a lot more data and doing lots more measuring on those campaigns. So thank you very much. I'll be very happy to take any questions.